Once we're excited about talking to the public about any contentious issue, whether it's biotechnology, whether it's climate, you name it, it's important for us to understand where we do it. What are the best places for us to engage? And what are the best ways to have the most important conversations that scientists need to be having? Today, unfortunately, that's on the internet. It's a place that is full of bad information and not necessarily the right information presented in a way that people are ready to hear it. And so that's why we need to step into these conversations as scientists and really exploit that network that the people who are saying information counter to science are outstanding at exploiting. So this is where we can actually have big, giant impacts by stepping into the right place with the right message. And in this part of the conversation today, in this part of the science communication training, we'll talk about the power of networks and how we can use them to get what we need as science communicators. My name's Kevin Folta. I'm a department chair at the University of Florida and also a professor, and learned about science communication the hard way by going out and actually doing it with boots on the ground, interaction at the public interface. And today I'll discuss some of the rest of what I do and why I do it, how I do it, and how it's important for us as communicators to understand how to best exploit the networks that communication flows through nowadays. The most important part about this is for us as scientists to stop talking to each other. We're really good at talking to other scientists in the language we understand, the language of data and the language of facts and evidence. That's how we talk to each other, and it doesn't work when we talk with a public audience. We need to be able to reach out beyond our tribe, stop speaking scientist to scientist, farmer to farmer, and actually speak to the public. And do it in their forum. Do it in the places where they seek information. And that's really important for us to do. It's not something we're comfortable doing. We're wading into hostile waters sometimes. And how do we do it, and how do we do it right? For me, it happens in two ways. And there's two ways that you can participate in science communication that are extremely meaningful. The first way is to generate content. On the internet, content is king, and there are many places that would be excited to look at the information that you present. The other way that we can help solve this problem is with amplification. If you don't want to generate content, you don't want to share science in a public place, you feel it's not your place to do that, you can make tremendous impacts by sharing the content that others create. So you have two good places to do this. Create new information or share information that you find valuable. Think of it this way. If you write something, write a blog, distill a scientific paper for a public audience, maybe talk about a major scientific controversy or maybe a news event, and you write this on a blog and share it with 1,000 people, which is very easy to do in today's social media atmosphere. And then that social media atmosphere shares that with 1,000 people. Each person shares it with 1,000. You have now put your information in front of 1 million people for free. How cool is that? So the idea here is that you're able to generate content or amplify content. So there's roles for you in both these spaces. And this is the way that we can use modern networks and use the internet to reach more people with scientific messaging. Ways that you can do this: blogging. Create content that just talks about what you do, what drives you. Share your values. Why are you excited to do the work that you do? What work amazes you from the rest of the field? You know, we're in this area in science where every day laboratories all over the world are turning out beautiful information and beautiful new data that never reaches the public because it dies in the boring pages of a scientific journal. Share that information. Tell the people who want information what gets you excited about this new science. You can write articles in public places like The Conversation, like medium.com. Any of these forums are really great places to share articles because they have ways of enhancing the dissemination. And if people get used to finding you and know where you present your work, they'll come back for more. It's amazing how many followers you can get just by providing good, accurate, trustworthy information. And the last part on this slide is distill others' work for a new tribe. Maybe take an article that you found really important and exciting and share it with people who may never find it. If there's a news article that breaks, it sometimes can cause people to panic or feel suspect about issues in food and farming. Break it down. Share your values. Talk about why you do what you do and why it's important. And then provide that information and distill that work so that people are excited to see it. It's all about content. YouTube videos, whether do it on YouTube, uh, present information in other places, generate content so people can find it. This is a wonderful, wonderful way for us to share science. So how do scientists do this better? Well, there's a lot of ways to do it. And I'm not going to go through all of these individually, but there's so many places that will be happy to publish your best work. Share content, share information. You have to make an active part of your career as a scientist stepping into that public interface. And if we all did it, you'd be surprised at how things would change, from the job outlook to funding. All of these things are up to us. And all we have to do is step into that public space and tell the truth. Tell the truth about what we do and why we do it. This is really easy, and we're making it much harder by always kind of engaging people in ways that are counterproductive. Step into these discussions, present the facts, present the evidence, present why you feel the way you do. And this is how we'll change that discussion. I was approached years ago by an online magazine called Cook's Cook. It has over 1.3 million subscribers. And you can kind of tell by the cover that who is the target audience here? Probably the foodie, the high-end boutique grocery store shopper, right? Someone who fancies themselves as understanding a lot about food and a lot about cooking. This was a great place for me to reach out beyond my tribe because I really don't belong to that group. But if I could share the information I know in a values-based discussion, I might be able to change some hearts and minds. And I wrote an article called GMOs, Safety and Lost Opportunities. We didn't talk about Roundup Ready soybeans and BT corn. What we talked about was, what are our values? How do we use technology to help the poorest people in the world, to help the environment? Maybe to help keep farmers profitable, or maybe make better food for the U.S. consumer who's subscribing to Cook's Cook. This is how I framed that discussion. Look at all the things we can't do. We have lots of technology to solve these problems in areas we all care about, our mutual concerns. Yet that technology is arrested and not moving to solve the problems that it was created to solve. This kind of article could have tremendous impact, and actually the editor from the magazine asked me to write more articles going forward, which I was happy to do. So this is one way that you can step out beyond your tribe. Chris Barbie does this extremely well too. He's written for Forbes. Chris Barbie is a graduate student of mine who's really enjoyed his time at the public interface and shown how it can really dramatically enhance his visibility as a graduate student and as a scientist, but also gives him a unique angle to develop his brand. So for students, this is a great way for you to step into the public discussion and use it to enhance your career and your marketability, showing that you're engaged and you care about the public, that you're excited to step into these discussions and have meaningful conversations. It really can separate you from the rest in the top 10 applications in that pile. Use science communication to reach out to others. Another great example is how I was able to write an article for physicians. Now, physicians, dietitians, nurses, they're the people who are always being asked the questions about their food and is it safe? And they don't always know the best way to answer. I would like to provide information in those forums so that they have the opportunity to understand what are the facts, what is the correct way to message them. And this is a very important tribe to reach out to. Physicians, dietitians, the folks who are at the center of the discussion at ground zero when people are asking questions. I write articles for farmers. Writing for agricultural magazines provides an opportunity for us to tell the people who want and need the technology how they can engage the public from their trustworthy position. People love farmers. They don't like farming. And so the way to correct that deficit is to have farmers presenting information in the correct way. And I love to be able to provide for them the information that they need to change hearts and minds. This article on gene editing was really important because they all know that it's coming, and they all know that it'll be of great advantage to their discipline. They just don't know that much about it necessarily, especially the nuts and bolts. And distilling down what it is and what it isn't is a really important part of that discussion. I also do a weekly podcast. And this was one of the most exciting things that I've ever stumbled into. It started with me sitting at a desk with a microphone, and now is quickly going on almost a million episodes, a million downloads from 120 some episodes. It shows what I mentioned a few slides ago. If you create content and it's quality content and it comes out on a regular basis and that people anticipate, you can build a tremendous audience around that content and around that vehicle. This is why it just takes stepping into it. It takes that first step to starting to generate content and doing it on a weekly basis or on a very regular basis that people can anticipate. The podcast is great because I don't really have to do anything. The star of the show is the guest. All I do is facilitate their discussion about their passions and what gets them excited about their science. The other big part of this outside of content is amplification. As I mentioned before, it's one thing to create it, but it's also very powerful to share it. So if you're not necessarily excited about blogging or creating YouTube videos or podcasts, share the information from the people who do. And this is the really important part of this, is that you can develop a network simply by being a content amplifier. That you can actually have tremendous gravity in this conversation by identifying the work that you trust and sharing it with the people who follow you. You'll find that you can develop a tremendous following just by being the person that they always can turn to for good information. Really important. There are many people online who are creating content. And in the farm space, there's folks like Brian Scott, Sarah Schultz, who do blogs that are not just about farming, but about what makes them tick. Sarah will write about her children. She'll write about the recipe she did. But these are the sides of this that humanize scientists and humanize farmers. Show the public that we are people who have the same values and dreams. This way, when the information flows, they trust it. And that's what's really important. So where do we have to be? Why is it important that we're amplifying other messages? And it all boils down to the way that information is disseminated in the modern age. So back before the internet, networks were pretty simple. You might watch the news, maybe talk to a physician, maybe talk to some other trusted source, and then you would share that information maybe with a couple other people. Networks were tiny. They didn't reticulate, they didn't articulate as well as they do today, because today's networks explode. That you share something on a Facebook page, it has the potential to reach 1 million people in a very short amount of time. The phenomenon of going viral happens. It happens when we least expect it, but it only happens if you're generating content and amplifying the content of others with your networks. This is actually an interaction diagram of a Twitter conversation. You can imagine how each one of these dots represents a different person who's sharing information, and the line shows the people they're interacting with. And unfortunately, scientists tend to be over there, all the way over there on the right, that talking to each other back and forth, scientist to scientist using scientific language, farmers talking to farmers. What we need to be is this node down over here. That node is the person who's disseminating information into that network, and then the network takes over from there. That people who find that information credible, now it explodes. That information travels very quickly. Folks who are not appreciating technology tend to be very good at exploiting these networks. It's their full-time job. Scientists, we ignore this vehicle and this opportunity to share our information and get it out to the most people.